Gut-wrenching new details in the murder of Georgia nursing student Laken Riley as the media blasts Republicans for daring to bring up the border crisis over it. Police reports revealing how the 22-year-old was beaten so badly she suffered a, quote, disfigured skull. Her body was then reportedly dragged to a secluded area. The illegal immigrant suspect, who cops say committed the heinous murder, is a Venezuelan national who crossed the unsecured southern border back in 2022. And as the nation debates the broken border, the liberal press would rather accuse Republicans of using Riley's death for political reasons.
Republicans obviously seizing on this horrific tragedy at the University of Georgia. They're seizing on this as an example of Biden's failure to protect the American people and to secure the border.
Riley's death igniting a political firestorm. State House Speaker John Burns indicating that the Georgia House this week will take steps on illegal immigration.
As if the initial facts were not horrifying enough or the sense of loss not deep enough by now, and all of it has now been compounded by the revelation the suspect was in this country unlawfully and how quickly that fact became politicized.
The Democrats are no better. California Congresswoman Katie Porter says it's important we don't make too much out of this one innocent girl's murder.
One instance shouldn't shape our overall immigration policy, which has so many different facets, including economic choices about what workers to allow in and how to create prosperity in America. So the situation is tragic and it's a loss, and it's important to acknowledge that, but also to recognize how all the other parts of immigration policy fit together.
But let's not look too far into it and don't change anything based on this poor innocent girl's murder. Jesse?
So much seizing. I want to be careful. I don't want to seize on this story or politicize this story. I hate to talk politics. This is what they do. They turn a policy disaster, a fatal disaster, into a process crime by Republicans. This is what they do. They don't want to talk about the sanctuary policy. They don't want to talk about the broken border. They want to talk about Republicans reacting. And then it becomes something that they're not on defense anymore. Now they're on offense. Now it's Republicans are politicizing a death. And this is how they get away with not solving any problems. The one woman in the soundbite, she was aghast that Georgia Republicans may take steps on illegal immigration. Oh, my goodness, you mean they might take steps to stop illegal immigration? They call that a political firestorm. Everybody else in the country calls it solving problems. And then Porter, we're not trying to trade economic growth for death. That's not the calculation. We still want immigration. That's fine. We just don't want illegal immigration, and we definitely don't want to keep illegal alien felons in the country so they can continue to commit crimes.
Well, Judge, that lawmaker might want to make this out to be just one instance, but there are many instances, and the latest is in Virginia, where a minor was assaulted by another Venezuelan illegal immigrant.
Well, Katie Porter should know better, because Katie Porter, although a congresswoman in California, is originally from Iowa. What happened in Iowa? Molly Tibbetts was killed in Iowa. So she actually has the gall to go on television and say, one instance shouldn't shape overall policy. Are you kidding me? The overall policy of this country is to protect its citizens. It is the #1 obligation of any nation to protect its citizens. And she's on there complaining that people are demanding that problems like this be solved. First of all, you had Molly Tibbetts, you had Kaylee Hamilton, you had Elizabeth Medina, and that's only in the past couple of years that I could think of without researching it. Not to mention the angel moms during the Trump administration, all of the mothers whose kids were killed by illegals, and President Trump tried to get the numbers of those to collect them, and there are certain states that wouldn't go along with collecting that information. So, you know, the liberals, I mean, as soon as someone dies from a gun, they call for gun control. But as soon as someone is murdered by an illegal, they never call for border control. They're not into that at all. But, you know, once Bragg in this city let the Venezuelans loose, right? And they end up going to, I think it's Arizona. Then Randall's Island, they start attacking the cops. And then you've got the Venezuelan in Virginia who just sexually assaulted a cop. The Venezuelans in Chicago, 4 of them who choked a guy and robbed him. I mean, this is only in the last couple of days. It's time that we stop the process. You can do it under the law. It's Section 212F of Title 8 of the immigration law. He can stop it. It's time that we recognize number one, we have to take fingerprints of every illegal, fingerprints with a photograph. And I'm going to do you one better. If we don't take DNA from these illegals who were all claiming asylum, so at least we at some point will know that they are who they say they are, because they can make up any name coming into this country. Plus, if we have a database with illegals in that database, we can match up crimes that are unsolved going forward in the criminal justice system. And the bottom line is, until we know who they are, until we can identify them, they should not be allowed in this country. There are too many crimes that have been committed, too many lives that have been taken, and too many families have been destroyed. And to let people in about whom we know nothing. Yeah. And we've got 7.2 million, and how many known gotaways and unknown gotaways? Now, why are they gotaways? Yes. Because they got away because they don't want to be identified, because they are criminals. There are criminals in the mix. I want to know who the pedophile is, who the batterer is, who's drunk and drives, who's an identity thief. They're in this group.
Yet the media says the real problem are Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, don't you guys understand that only Anderson Cooper can talk about this issue? Only Jake Tapper can talk about this issue. No one else can. So if you want the simplest way to identify truth, when the media claims you're seizing or you're pouncing, that means you've struck reality gold. If you say illegal aliens have killed an innocent young woman, that's a pounce. It's true. If a man claims to be a woman and beats real women in sports, that's a pounce, because it's true. If you say there are higher rates of crime, violent crime, that's a pounce, but it is true. When an anchor uses the phrase pounce or seize, they are telling you to shut up and stop telling the truth, stop doing their job, because then it reveals they're not doing theirs, that they're lying. You know, CNN accused Fox and this show of pouncing on the crime wave. The crime wave didn't go away, but Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon did, because we pushed the pounce. We called them accountable on this. And right now, there's good news. Everyone is pouncing on the news. We're seizing on the people who distort the information that they themselves control. That's the beauty, because Google Gemini, for example, is imploding because every single person can now pounce, because everyone's an expert on themselves. So you can put your name in there and see what they say. And then you learn what everybody in the media has already known for years, that they are lying to you, that they make up crap. Anybody can do it. Jesse, you put your name in to Google Gemini, you will find out, you will find the smear. It's great. Pouncing and seizing is what's going to save this country. Seize and pounce on every story. Hell, it saved Bud Light. If people didn't pounce on that, Bud Light would be done. Now they're back. It might actually save Harvard if they change their ways. It's going to save this country.
Harold?
There's no excuse for anyone in the media making the case that someone raising the point that our broken border is a part of what needs to be fixed to ensure that we don't have illegal migrants killing people. President Biden should reinstate some of the smartest and the best and most effective of the policies, executive orders that he rescinded when he was elected president. He also should probably shut the border down for a week or two. But I would remind everyone around this table that two things can be right. If the president of the United States in an executive order could reform the asylum process, President Trump would have done it. You know why I didn't do it? You can't. You have to have legislation to do that. The president of the United States, regardless of whom it may be, cannot have an executive order to spend more money to ensure that we get more people at the border to stop, catch, and release, so we have more people there, more law enforcement there. The president should reinstate the policies, the executive orders that were working under President Trump, and state new ones to help us out. And Republicans and Democrats, shame on you and shame on President Trump for telling Republicans not to support anything that would help President Biden get reelected. Democrats, I listen to Congresswoman Porter, whom I like. Democrats often say when there's a gun shooting, and all Republicans do is say we need more mental health money. That's what we sound like now when we say that the border should not be fixed. Two things can be right at the same time.
One is a constitutional right.
But my only point is they argue. It's not
they don't have a constitutional right to come here.
It's the political argument that people have. You're making my point by making the political argument now. We have to fix the problem. And there's no reason.
I don't want to fix it. I want to stop it.
Yeah.
Well, that's.
I don't want to reform
That's a
asylum.
metaphor. That's a metaphor.
I don't want to reform it.
They don't all have the
I
right
want
to
stop
come
it.
here.
Then, so we differ. I don't think you end the asylum process. We're the United States of America.
No,
I pause it.
we end the process
pause it for
where
a while.
everybody runs in at the same time.
I agree with
anywhere
everything
they
you
want.
said. We need more money to process
I don't
them.
want more money. I want
well, you
him to
can't
stop
do what
it.
you want. You can't do what you want without more money.
Stop it.
It's easy for you to say this. I get it.
94 executive orders that Donald
Reinstate
Trump
them
had.
all.
Look, Greg Abbott. Look
Reinstate
at what
them all.
Greg Abbott did. He
Reinstate them all.
closed that
Hey,
border.
Harold, you know what? At the
Reinstate
end of
them
the
all.
day, everybody's
Reinstate them all.
happy that Democrats are at least acknowledging the problem. The administration downplayed it and ignored it for years while these criminals were coming over
But I
the
want
border.
you guys at least as your own party to come to the
Okay.
table.
Don't
as
you
well.
dare
All right,
seize on
I have
this
to go.
issue.
All right.
Don't you dare.
Up next, Wendy's is causing a fast food freakout over a plan to surge charge your Baconator, Jesse.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.